Good morning, welcome to this meeting of our Accountability and Performance meeting. I'm Jonathan Shepherd, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire. I'm joined by Andy Proffitt, Chief Constable of Hertfordshire Constabulary. Welcome to members of the public joining this meeting. This meeting forms part of my duty as the Police and Crime Commissioner to hold the Chief Constable to account for the work and performance of the Constabulary. It is a webcast for public transparency, and we hope that you find the meeting interesting. The webcast is on watch-only mode, so there's no ability for the public to ask questions. The agenda today will be covering live facial recognition, a national inspection on the effectiveness of the police and law enforcement response to group-based child sexual exploitation, an update on firearms licensing and control room performance, and we'll cover the agenda in that order. Good morning, Chief Constable.
Good morning.
Perhaps we could start with live facial recognition. So the Constabulary has announced that it's going to be doing a trial of live facial recognition technology in the county. I welcome that, and there's a lot of scrutiny process in place around that. Perhaps a number of things I wanted to cover this morning around that. Perhaps we could just start by if you could talk through why the Constabulary has wanted to undertake this trial and what you're hoping the outcomes of it will be.
Yeah, of course, Commissioner, thank you. Live facial recognition is a way of catching more criminals. And at its simplest level, I want to use every means lawfully and ethically and reasonably at my disposal to do just that. It's a way of using camera technology to identify individual people incredibly accurately, but with people involved as well to provide the right safeguards to catch people who are wanted for crimes in Hertfordshire. So be that robbery, be that domestic abuse, be that violent offending, car theft, burglary. The live facial recognition trial we're going to bring to Hertfordshire, I hope, will help me catch more of those criminals.
Thank you. And could you describe how the deployment works? And so if members of the public happen, we're not going to go into the location today because it's published in due course, but if members of the public happens to be in that location at that right time, what would members of the public see happening?
It's a really simple concept, a bit like members of the public will understand that in town centres there are CCTV cameras. So we will deploy a camera with live facial recognition technology sitting behind it. And what that means is that camera has access to a predetermined list that the police choose of known criminals who are likely to be in that area or in our county. The camera searches the faces of people walking past it, and the technology matches the individual. So if I'm Billy the burglar and I walk past that camera and you're monitoring that camera, it will say that person there looks like Billy the burglar. You then look at it and go, yeah, I think that is a good match. I agree with the technology. And you as an expert then would send a local officer in that high street or zone and say, go and stop that person and have a conversation with them because the technology suggests that's the burglar. And if the officer goes and confirms it is, the arrest gets made. And if it's not, the system is really, really accurate. So in the small chance it's not, we can correct that and the person can go on their way. So that's what it is.
And that interaction that the officer might have with that member of the public wouldn't be particularly different to if an officer had just been on patrol and had just seen somebody that they perhaps recognise themselves.
Exactly that. It's neighbourhood policing supported by technology to try and put our neighbourhood officers in front of the right people having the right conversations. A key part of this is making sure it's done in a professional and human way. This is not brand new technology. It's been used successfully in other forces in the country, in London, in Essex and elsewhere, and it's having some really good results.
Thank you. And so we're not going to go into the deployment location and details because that gets published by the Constabulary kind of in advance anyway. But in terms of how a deployment location is selected, what factors are considered by the Constabulary in reaching that decision of whereabouts in the county the technology might be used?
I mean, it's a really important question and probably a really obvious answer, to be frank. We will pick the places where people are likely to be and or where our crime is likely to be high. So high streets, high footfall areas are the types of places we would deploy the technology. It's a mobile capability that we can develop, so you can put the cameras in a van, for example, and put it in the right place. So we can be really, really thoughtful about how we do it.
Thank you. You talked about the technology being fairly tried and tested and used by other police forces previously, new to Hertfordshire but not new nationally. How accurate is the technology, and what mechanisms are in place to ensure or minimise the risk of people being wrongly matched or there to be discrimination in that system?
Yeah, there's been an awful lot of independent academic study into the accuracy of this capability we're talking about, live facial recognition, and there's lots of statistics that I could kind of talk about here, but the headlines are that it's really, really good at positively identifying people, and there is really very low circumstances where it identifies someone incorrectly. The safeguards that are in place around that is that's the technology, but then there's people that make further decisions on the back of that. So the person in the van says, I think that is a good match by the tech, then sending an officer to do it. So there is always a human interaction here. So in many ways this technology, as you said, Commissioner, is no different to an officer seeing someone they think they recognise off a briefing sheet and going having a conversation. That will be exactly the same. An officer will have a conversation with a person and check the facts that the technology is giving them, and only if they agree with it will then use their powers to make an arrest. So there's a huge amount of safeguarding behind it. What's important though here is, I recognise, and the evidence base nationally indicates that some members of our community may feel worried about this, from kind of an infringement on civil liberties. Some particular parts of our community may feel that they could be disproportionately targeted by this. What I can say to you is that the evidence base nationally says there's no statistically significant difference between the accuracy of the technology for any kind of demographic factor. There are differences, but no statistical significant difference. So we will be working really hard with community groups in Hertfordshire, with our IAGs, with the Race Inclusion Board and others to say this is it, this is how it works, come and look at it, see how we're trialling it, to build that trust and confidence in the capability that we're using, and really, really carefully assess the results that we get from it.
Thank you. And part of that reassurance and an understanding to people in the community is kind of an understanding of how people kind of get into the watch list essentially, and I'm sure the answer is probably quite obvious in terms of people being wanted, but what process, again without going into the details of kind of exactly who might be on the list of people being sought, but how does the constabulary decide who is kind of on the watch list for that deployment being looked for?
So we would, as a constabulary, look at who are the high risk, high harm offenders that we think we need to arrest. The obvious categories: burglary, car crime, violence, sexual offending, drug dealing, and we would compile a list of people we currently want to question about that offending, and those individuals are going to be the people on the watch list. You can tailor that if you've got, let's say, I don't know, hypothetically we're going to deploy in Watford, just as an example. You could tailor your list to local offenders as well, but there has to be a really careful process and an evidence base behind why you put people on that list. It's all documented and all recorded.
Thank you. And one of the kind of questions you see in the kind of national debate about this technology is around the kind of privacy implications. So what happens when an individual isn't a match? So someone has walked past the van, they're not a match. What happens to the image of somebody who's done that?
That image is immediately deleted. It's processed. The system says that person isn't on our record list, and the machine immediately forgets it. If the individual is a match, that is then retained for 24 hours to ensure that the action that was taken on the back of that, if you need to go back, you've got the audit trail around that. So if it's not you, your image is immediately deleted.
Thank you. So there's a clear evidence base before someone would go on to the watch list in terms of being wanted for an offence, and if you're not, it's immediately deleted. I think that's reassuring.
That's exactly that, and all this information that we have and largely immediately delete or retain because it was a positive match is not shared with anybody else. This is police data for policing purposes of fighting crime.
Thank you. And a question that gets raised kind of in the media discussion about this is can the public opt out of being scanned by a live facial recognition system?
So the public, or more precisely a criminal, could not opt out of us deciding to put them on a list. But the way this deployment would work, it's pre-advertised, where we're going to be. There's lots of signage up on the day, so if you were walking down a street, you could decide, well, I don't want to walk down that street because I can see there's a live facial recognition exercise on there. So to that extent, you can walk the other way. I guess the honest piece is part of the policing tactics. If as you walk away, you look rather shifty and you've run away from the signs, it's quite likely one of my officers will follow you and tap you on the shoulder and say, why did you turn round at that point? So it's pre-advertised, it's pre-published. There's no ability for criminals to opt out, but you have a choice about whether you walk down that street when you see those signs.
Thank you. How will the public know when and where the deployment is taking place?
It will be advertised on our websites, it will be advertised on our social media channels, and as I just alluded to, in the location on the day there'll be really clear signage.
Thank you. And I appreciate in advance of the kind of first trial of this technology that there's a lot of questions about it, and we're talking about the kind of theory and the systems and the processes. And of course, one of the things that's really key in terms of evaluating is what actually happens when the technology is used. How will those outcomes be evaluated and communicated after the first deployment?
Well, we will really carefully evaluate it because I'm really, really interested in it. I believe this will help us catch criminals in Hertfordshire, which I think is what I certainly want to see, and I think that the public of Hertfordshire want me to be delivering. But we'll look at it and we'll publish it within 5 working days. So there'll be full visibility to you and the public of what it did.
Thank you, and look forward to seeing that, and no doubt we'll probably discuss the outcomes of that at a future one of these meetings. Thank you for that, and to provide some assurance to members of the public watching, there is a lot of scrutiny going on around this, including some community scrutiny events when the deployment location has been announced, and as Police and Crime Commissioner I'm keeping a keen interest in how the technology is being used. Recommendation 4 from that previous report was around the record management systems in policing to identify those organised networks, those groups, and it identified areas nationally in policing where they weren't good enough, and that identification wasn't always happening. Has the constabulary implemented that recommendation, and are you confident that there are sufficient measures in place locally in record management systems to be able to identify group-based COC?
Yes, we've invested into a dedicated team of analysts now who are responsible for looking at this on a daily and weekly basis. So all our information, intelligence, reported crime is looked at. Where there's any crime of concern or note in terms of this kind of risk of group-based child exploitation, that is specifically given to a dedicated analyst then to look at. We share that information with partners and work out the right way forward. So we've invested a lot in getting the records management and the understanding and the administration right.
Thank you. We referred just a moment ago to the National Hydrant Programme and some of the national best practice being driven in this area. Recommendation 8 was around engagement with the continuing professional development offer that programme provides. How has the constabulary sought to take advantage and utilise that programme?
So we engaged with the Hydrant team earlier this year. We gave them our self-assessment of where we are, which was my first answer to your question. Not perfect, but improving, and here's our plan. They endorsed our plan and said that looks like the right things you should be focused on as a constabulary, and the Hydrant team will be coming back in the coming months to say, well, how are we getting on at it, implementing that plan? So it's an ongoing dialogue with the Hydrant team because we want to be as good as we possibly can be in this space.
Thank you. Recommendation 9 was around victim blaming language and some of the issues that have been in some parts of the country and have been widely reported in the media around how victims and survivors have been treated and have they been assessed as victims very often is the question. What steps has the constabulary taken to satisfy itself that victim blaming language has been eradicated if it existed in Hertfordshire, and if it was identified would be addressed rapidly?
So we've had an extensive programme of training and awareness. We've had inputs to frontline officers, to specialist investigators, to control and call handling staff and others to understand the risks. We've had sessions that's included the lived experience of victims, voices of children. So we really bring it home to, my officers and staff who do incredible work, the complexity and the nuance of what to listen to and how important a word or a phrase or an expression is then in terms of how we capture that information, because sometimes victim blaming language is absolutely not okay, but sometimes it's unintended. So we've done an awful lot of training around that. We are working with a range of different victim support groups to check and challenge ourselves and say, look, we're working really hard at this. If you spot something where you think we've been clumsy in our language, or indeed our attitudes and behaviours aren't spot on, an open channel we need to know. So there's that kind of open conversation going on. The one bit here that I think we need to do a little bit more on is how we are using our own kind of search of what we're writing down to almost like a keyword search. Are there risky words or risky phrases that we really oughtn't to be saying, so we can proactively trawl and find for that? And that's something the team are working on, so we've got that kind of audit review of what's been recorded.
Okay, thank you very much. That's reassuring. You talked a little bit earlier around some of the preventative work in the problem profile and the work the constabulary was doing. If I could just kind of drill into that a little bit more, there was a national recommendation in the 2023 report specifically around Operation Make Safe, which is some of that preventative work going into premises that might be a risk and so on. How does the constabulary implement that work, and perhaps you could give me an example of how it's been utilised over the last year?
Yeah, of course, it's really important work. So Make Safe, Operation Make Safe, as you said, is work the constabulary does to make sure that hotels and other places where children may be exploited by abusers are aware themselves of the risk. So if you get a 40-year-old man seeking to book a room overnight with a young-looking girl, the first line of defence, we want to be that hotel reception person to say, hang on, this doesn't feel right. So Make Safe is about the police going out and having those conversations with hotels and other establishments around the county to build that level of knowledge up and say, if this happens, please call us. So we have visited in recent months 21 different hotels, partners and groups to have that conversation. We're also working with licensed taxis and taxi companies, because quite often the national intelligence picture is taxis can be used by abusers to move around with children they're seeking to abuse. And we've got some really proactive plans to be both overt and more covert in our checks that we're doing in an entirely supportive way to make sure that everybody in Hertfordshire is on the lookout for this and doing everything they can do to minimise the risk of happening. So there'll be more activity in the coming months. We've got a further 20 plus engagements where we'll be going out talking to other premises and checking their systems and processes in a entirely kind of developmental and supportive way. But it's important, part of what my team do is check that others are doing the bits that they need to do.
Thank you very much for that, and positive to see the progress that's being made on those recommendations. So thank you for those updates. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is firearms licensing, which is a regular topic for these meetings, but not one we've covered for a couple of months, but continues to be an area of interest from the public in my inbox. Could you give me an update on the current number of outstanding renewals and new applications, and particularly how many are outside the 120-day national standard for decision making?
Yes, I can, Commissioner, thank you. So I'm going to give you Hertfordshire only figures here. When I was given this information 2 days ago, there were 788 outstanding renewals and 635 outstanding grant applications, and of those, 360, 45% of the renewals were older than 120 days, and 535 of the grants, 85% were older than the 120 days. The headline is that's still too high, but those numbers are coming down month on month and systematically.
Thank you very much for that, and I think when we perhaps talked about those numbers earlier in the year, we were talking about figures probably in the sort of 1,200 type figure for renewals when we saw significant progress made through the year to bring those down, which I welcome. We've talked before around the work being done to improve the timeliness and efficiency of decision making in this area. Can you give me an update on the progress for that? That's clearly is seen in the outcomes, but in terms of some of those systems improvements, what progress has been made?
We've worked really, really hard on this, and the broad umbrella that we call this is we've taken a risk-based approach to renewals. You know, what is the profile of the individual, what's the intelligence, what are the risks around this, and tailor our approach accordingly. Not taking any risks, but being informed by those risks. You know, we assess each case as either a red or amber or a green case. We make some of those case direction decisions right up front. Which channel should this go in terms of how quickly we can move through that. We've improved the kind of the internal records management that we've got within our firearms licensing team, so we've streamlined that for the officers and staff doing this work, and we've built some new reporting tools and kind of performance product that's really giving the teams a really, really crystal understanding of what cases against what risk sit where and in what numbers, as well as, you know, I think I told you a few months ago we've changed some of the senior leadership in there who are having a really positive impact. So that is part of the success we're seeing, and I guess to give you a little bit of bringing that to life. So the average number of days now it takes for a renewal is 150 days. A year ago that was 250. So you can see some of the pace that is picking up. And in October just gone, we issued 347 renewals. And in November just gone, we issued 550 renewals. For those 2 months in 2024, it was 134 and 79. So you can see the uptick in work. Now you might well say, well, given that uptick in efficiency, productivity, and the numbers that you're processing, why are the numbers not falling more quickly? And of course, the important thing to remember here, this year we're in now, this 12 months, is a real peak in the 5-year cycle of renewals. So we are getting a huge amount coming in, but because we're more efficient and we're processing much more, we're seeing those numbers gradually come down. And the risk-based renewal process is at the heart of that.
Thank you, and I think that reflects the significant work that has been done over the last year or so on that. Given that and understanding what you're saying around the kind of peak in this year, what's your updated assessment of the likely time frame for that backlog of outstanding renewals, the ones that are sitting significantly over the national time standard to be cleared?
So I think that longer than I would like, I think is the answer, but we are making month-on-month progress and good progress. So this year is a peak, but next year's fairly tough in terms of demand as well. To get down to almost as close to today's business today, nothing outstanding, I think is 18 months to 2 years. But I think we will see in the next 6 months and in the next 12 months, the numbers I gave you at the start, the 600 or 700 outstanding grants and renewals, we will see those come down. But I think we've got another 18 months to 2 years of hard work to get to a position that we all want to be in, of this being almost on demand.
Okay, thank you. And particularly that relates to some of the grant applications, I imagine, as well, does it, in terms of understandably the renewals being prioritised and therefore that getting the kind of prompt throughput of grants will be the bit that will be slowest.
Correct. We focus on the renewals because that's an existing licence holder. quite often with a business interest that will sit behind that. So we focus on the renewals, not at the exclusion of grants, but we do disproportionately look at the renewals, and that's why the grants has been shifting slightly.
Thank you. And can you talk me through the work that's being done to improve communication with applicants and stakeholders? It's been a bit of a theme around this issue, around people knowing what's happening when they're likely to get a decision. I know there's been work done to improve that.
Lots of work. There is a monthly newsletter now published on the Hertfordshire Constabulary website, as well as the Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire website, because again, your listeners will be aware, with an interest in this, this is a three-force partnership. We share those monthly newsletters with the range of different independent groups who advise and have interest in firearms licensing. The leadership team there is working really closely with our public complaints team to understand any patterns or concerns that are coming in, so we can either change our activity or change our communication to address any public complaints or concerns that might be coming in. We are also now having monthly meetings with BASC, the kind of the professional firearms licensing community nationally. So we're keeping our national kind of stakeholder briefed around all of this. So regular newsletters, regular website updates, and lots of conversation with key affected groups.
Thank you very much for that update, and appreciate the progress that's being made there. I'm sure we'll come back to it in time, but pleasing to see that continued progress and reduction in the outstanding work. I'm going to go on to our final agenda item, which is control room performance. There's been some really significant improvements recently delivered by the constabulary in the control room, and really quite fundamental area of business, how quickly are the phones answered. I wanted to just understand some of the factors around that. Can you start by just covering, particularly for the benefit of members of the public listening, how performance has been over recent months, and perhaps how it's compared to similar periods in previous years?
Yes, I can. As you rightly say, Commissioner, performance in terms of the pace at which we answer 999 emergency and 101 non-emergency calls has dramatically improved. We're sat underneath today our force control room, and up there we have an absolutely superb team of officers and staff who are working literally tirelessly 365 days a year. So 999 calls in November, and this has been a consistent theme of improvement. 94% of our 999 calls were answered within 10 seconds, and the average answer time is 4 seconds, which is pretty remarkable, and nationally compares very, very favourably. And for 101 calls, by the way, on the 999 calls, that was 14,600 calls in November. And on the 101 calls, we had 21,900 in November. The average answer time was 1 minute and 4 seconds for a non-emergency time. Now, I've not rung my doctor recently, but last time I did, it wasn't a 1 minute 4 second answer. And the abandon rate, people who chose not to wait, was 6.4%. So 93.6% of people were very happy with that very, very quick answer time. So my message to my team upstairs is they're doing a brilliant job, and to everybody listening, the Hertfordshire Constabulary Control Room, whether you ring 999 101 or contact us through other website or online options, they are doing a brilliant job. Get in touch with us, we're here to help.
Thank you, and those are really really positive sets of data, and as you say, there are many public services you would struggle to get hold of in 1 minute and 4 seconds for a non-emergency use, and that data has been steadily improving through the year and is significantly improved on what it was last year, the year before, and so on in the same reporting periods. What would you attribute the increase in performance to, and how are you planning to sustain it?
There's a number of factors, Commissioner. We have fully resourced the room upstairs. There were 12 months ago 40 or 50 gaps in our recruitment, which we've closed. which is obviously a key determinant of whether you can answer the phone on time. We had and we continue to have a really strong leadership team up there who are really into the detail here, but importantly really supporting, recognising and developing the people up there. So it's a place where people enjoy working, want to come to work. Of course that helps build productivity and morale and good policing. We've also looked really carefully at technology, so how we use our initial kind of calls. There are different options you can do through our initial voice welcome system. That's working really well for us. We've got a really effective understanding of peaks and troughs in demand, so we're moving resources round according to different times of day, different times of year, different times of the week. So there's a whole range of things that are meaning that we are delivering superb performance.
Thank you. I wanted to just dig into that point around technology. How is that helping to understand demand in the control room and perhaps to ensure that calls that aren't a matter for the police can be better triaged, can go to the right agency?
So it's a really important area of work, and we're using our own intelligence systems. We're starting to use voice analytics and kind of artificial intelligence supports to really understand that of how many calls are resulting in us needing to do something. So only about 50% of calls result in the creation of an incident the police need to go to. So in those other 50% of calls, we may have needed to know, but actually did somebody else need to know, and are there ways that we can help that person make a different decision next time and get more quickly to the help they need? That might be through us diverting them there, or them calling a different number, or speaking to different people. So all of those things are part of the kind of the core management function that the team upstairs are doing, literally every single month, going, who's calling us, why are they calling us, did they need to call us, or should we be thinking about other support being made available to them?
Thank you. How does the constabulary monitor the misuse of 999 101? Obviously we want people to call those numbers when they need to and when they need a police response, but you do see examples kind of in the national media from time to time of where people just really shouldn't be calling an emergency number. How big a problem is it, and what's the constabulary doing to improve public awareness of what you should or shouldn't be ringing 999 or 101 for?
So we have a really clear understanding of what we call our misuse of the 999 system. Now that can range from someone choosing to ring 999 when they should have rung 101 or could have used another channel. So they did need to speak to the police, but 999 wasn't the right channel. Or people who are deliberately misusing the 999 call, hoax calls, nuisance calls, maybe people from time to time with learning difficulties or other things. So there's lots of different reasons why a 999 call should not have been made, and we tailor our approach accordingly. Clearly, if it could have been a 101 call, there'll be an education type conversation, and if it's an individual who is deliberately wasting our time or causing a nuisance, we can block the number, and or indeed we can go and knock on the door and arrest people for wasting police time. So all those options are done depending on the circumstances. If you wrap it all up together and put the quantum, we take about 500 999 calls a day. Overall, our assessment is about 1/3 of those should not have been a 999 call, and over time I want to see that reduce, probably largely through shift to 101 or online reporting, but being effective at taking out the small but important number of individuals who are deliberately wasting our time.
Thank you, and ultimately that's about making sure those lines are clear and free for people in genuine need or risk or danger or for a crime in progress. Thank you, it's an interesting point. There's been quite a bit of work to improve the digital options for contacting the police, and certainly when I've been in the control room before, staff have talked about particularly younger people maybe being more confident to report in that way, which is important. How well is that kind of more digital contact used, and how's it being promoted to the public as an equal alternative to phone?
It's developing well. It hasn't yet anywhere near reached the potential I think it has to provide the best service for the public who want to contact us through that means. The advantage of using a digital web chat forum is it's really, really quick. And I've got people upstairs who can have multiple conversations at once, so it's a really, really effective way of doing it. At the moment, we receive about 241 web chats a week, which is improving, but against the context of about 500 999 calls and 600 or 700 101 calls a day, there's an awful lot more potential to divert some of that work into web chats. We've got campaigns running around that. Indeed, I think in the run-up to Christmas, we've got some campaigns running around the different options to contact the police. We've recently revamped our website to make it more obvious that there is a click here if you just want to chat with us online, because sometimes that can be a little bit hidden. So we're really working hard to make sure the public understand it's there, recognise it's a great option if it's a good option for them, and it quite often will result in a much better and a much quicker answer to whatever your question might be.
Thank you. It is a really good tool, and I think important for that public awareness to be that actually you can go in and talk to exactly the same control room operators. If you've rung 101, you're not going to get lost into a kind of chatbot type function.
You'll get the same answer quicker, and actually you'll immediately get given, if you need information or links or kind of wider references, the public will know that can be sent straight to you through that chat forum. So it's a fantastic tool.
Fantastic, and hopefully something that will get taken up more and more. But really positive to see the improved performance in the control room, and I know the team up there have worked incredibly hard to bring that about. So it's good to see that coming to fruition in that data. That brings us to the end of today's agenda. Thank members of the public for watching, and hope you found it interesting. And Chief Constable, thank you very much to you.
Thank you.